The Rebbe now is going to explain why the Rashi brings down the name of the author, Rabbi Meir. Um, because the Rebbe says this is going to answer a sharp student that might have a question, and the answer comes by giving the name Rabbi Meir, and that would answer the student's question that he might raise. That's the Rashi style, that when there is a possible question by a sharp student, he will answer it by mentioning the name. The issue is here, why is at the end of the day the difference between whether you touch the body through connecting to it directly, or you touch the body by throwing an arrow, say, and connecting with it? That seemingly should also be a connection. And that has to do with the halacha that Rameir does the din of Garmi. Usually we know Groma, a cause, would be exempt. But Garmi, says Rab Meir, which means it's either more direct, closer in time, or closer in space. If that causes, that can be directly attributed to you. That would be the chiluk between touching through a other item or throwing, which is a connection, but it's not so close. Let's look inside. A Talmud Zion, a Talmud Memulach can have and a sharp student can, however, ask, Ibal does in the following. Since in both cases, Saiba Chibure Hames, whether it is by connecting to the mace by touching through something else, on Saiba Zorag by Chetz Vaharogai, and also when you throw the arrow and you kill them that way, is the negia, the mace, nita negia kipshuta. It's not literally, you're not touching the mace, you're touching something else. Norbelo is in achibur, but it is a connection, was wird geschaffen durch eine zweite Sache, which is comes about through something else. So so therefore we need explanation. So in the end, in was besteht der Chilik zwischen die zwei Fane Chibur? What is the difference between these two types of connection? Connecting by connecting through intermediate, or by throwing an arrow, shooting an arrow. What's the difference? Was dafke beim ersten Öfen wird man tome betumas meis. Only in the first case you become tome betumas meis, that you are like touching the mace itself. So daitet Rashi on the Asbore says, Rashi points out the explanation to bringing the Bal Hamaimer, by bringing the author of the statement, Rameir. The Gemara sagt klal, the Gemara gives a rule as Rameir is doing dina de Garmi. Rameir would judge the laws of Garmi, this haste. What is Garmi different than Groma? Aval Pivos Kaimelon as Groma is potter, even though we have the halacha that when you cause a damage, not you're not the one that did the damage, but you caused it, is potter, is exempt. Alta, but Rameir on the other hand holds as oib der gram is boyfriend shall garmi, if the cause is in a way of garmi, which means a closer connection to the person with the cause is closer to what happened, is as punkt ve'amazik biyadayim, then it is exactly the same as doing damage directly with your hands. Umiz mechuyev tzitzolum far nezek, and you're obligated to pay for the damages if it's a case of garmi. What's the chilik between groma and garmi? The nakudas achilik zwischen groma and garmi. What is the point of difference between groma and garmi? Is groma meant cause to goyrem, means as the hezek vet nigram ba'ofen, that the damage is caused in a way as is do arichuk, that there is a distance between the cause and the effect. Either b'mokim, in space there's a distance, or the bisman, or time, that there's a distance. Zwischen pulas hamazik, between the act of the one who does the damage, and der hezek bepoil, and the actual damage that takes place. That would be groma. Ashenkin garmi meant, what garmi means, when der hezek wird aufgetan bekiruf, the damage is accomplished close, either mokken close in space, uzman close in time, tzupulas odom to the act of the person. That's called garmi. When it's close in space or time, then it's a more direct connection to the person doing it. Well, the same thing is in our case between the connection of another through a keli, chibur, and the throwing and hitting the person. Even though in both cases, side by chibur hames, on side by zorak by both by when you connect to the mace and also when you're throwing and you kill them. Is there's only an idea of a connection, connecting piece, and building a connection with the mace. You're not touching the mace itself. In both cases, you're just connecting to the mace. There's a connection to the mace through something else. But yet there is a major difference between the connection between chibur and mace and when you throw something and you kill him through what you threw. When you touch the mace, that touching with the keli, when you touch the mace, that creates a closeness, a connection with the mace. When the faris is ki'ilu negeya b'meis atzmi, it's as if you were touching the mace itself. Al derech by garmi canal, similar to as garmi, like we said before, as the zvert farrechen mazik b'yadayim is considered mazik b'yadayim because you're like touching it. But if it's a case just through the arrow, but der koyach kommt in Berührung mit dem Mace befsek mokim, where the power of the person that touches that throws the arrow that touches the mace, it comes in contact with koyach behefsek mokim, but there is an interruption of space. It's not directly. Is nit ki'ilu negeh b'mais atzmei. It's not that if you touch the mace itself. That is Rabbi Meir giving us the chiluk that when you connect, that's like touching the mace itself. But when you throw, the connection comes with interruption from place. It's more like groma than garmi, and we don't consider that a connection. And now the Rebbe says ches, und do zet men binyonim ufloyim, in the wondrous things in Rashi, al derech ha'alocha, according to halacha. The Rebbe is going to point to different languages between the way that Rashi brings it down and the way that Rambam brings it down. And we'll see, because Rashi's approach is different than the Rambam's approach, so all these changes of languages are fitting in very well. What does the Rambam say? The Rebbe quotes first the Rambam. Und das sieht man bin Yonim Ufloim Aderach Halacha dem Chilik zwischen Loshen Rashi and Loshen Rambam, the language of Rashi and the language of the Rambam in this case. That Inyan Sebesiman Siyum Pirush Rashi, this idea that Rashi brings down at the end, we think that even if you throw an arrow, so we have a pasuk that equates it to Negeya, that it should be not at least Negeya. So this idea brings in Rambam, is brought down the Rambam. Of a Midrash Shinuyim Ikrim, there is three major differences. So this is the language of the Rambam. The pasuk said anybody who kills and anybody who touches a cholol, will it then enter your mind? This person goes and shoots an arrow, and he kills it, or he throws a stone and he kills it. Will he be tummy for 7 days? Pasuk says anybody that kills. Would you really think? Says the Rambam. He doesn't even bring a pasuk to reject it. He doesn't think. He just says it's not possible. Elo, but it's talking about when you connect. It's not talking about when you throw. So look at the difference the Rebbe is going to point out between the way that Rambam writes it and the way Rashi writes it. Aleph. First of all, ashinui hachi tamuha, a very a change which is actually very surprising. The Rambam zogt v'chisala alaitcha. Is it then going to enter your mind? Meaning it's not something even which you have an idea. We don't need a posik to reject it. This will then, would it ever even enter your mind? He doesn't have to negate it. We don't need it all. It doesn't bring kain hekesh in them. It doesn't bring any hekesh like the Rashi brings down. That's why it says kol negeya, that it has to be negeya, not that it does, because we need a posik because it doesn't even make sense in the first place. Das heißt, das ist ein Milse de Tmiye, was hat melechatchila cannot need besvara. This is something surprising which doesn't even make sense logically. Canal Siv Dalet. Why, as we said earlier, Siv Dalet, why would it become Tameh if it didn't touch? But Rashi is different. Rashi brings a posik, brings a hekesh. Nitvi in Rashi v'sifri yochel afilu zorak chulu Talmud leimar. Rashi would say that you would think even you threw Talmud leimar b'chol negei b'cholu makish chulu, they equate it. The says the way Rashi writes it in the sifri. That means, as is there is a possibility, and there is actually a thought. That one who shoots an arrow should become tome tumas mes. Darf onkommen zum hekesh, and we need to come on to negate this, the hekesh, from heurig lenegeya. The Torah equated the heurig to negeya. Kedei zu shel sein this in order to negate this idea, so that no, that throwing a chetz is not metame. But according to the Rambam, it's not even a svara. We don't need a post to negate that. That's number one. Different. Uh, so the Rebbe calls this change very surprising, that the Rambam even doesn't accept it even as a thought, doesn't even need a posik, and according to Rashi and Sifri, that would be a possibility, and we have a hekesh to negate the svara that somebody who throws a chetz to become tummy, a chetz that killed someone and that should become tummy. Based another difference, the Rambam is moisiv dugma. He adds an additional tool. By us, it just says zorak chetz. He says, as an example, or zorak even v'harogei, either throwing a chetz or a stone and killed him. And of course, the Evan is not Mekabel Tuma, as we'll see, the Rebbe will point out. So, but he adds a stone on top of Chetz. Gimel, in the Rashi, the Sifri state, Zorak boy Chetz v'har rogoi. He threw, we're talking about throwing on the person who got killed. You threw on him, and you killed him. So there is the him. We're talking also about the person who got killed. Oh, but in Rambam is the Loshin. The Rambam doesn't discuss him; he just discusses the person who shot it. Yorachetz, he shot an arrow. V'horag, and he killed. Zorak eben v'horag, killed, not harogoi, not killed him. As vet nid der mon der nerag, it doesn't mention the one who was killed. Based on the above, we can say that these changes are hinged one on the other. The Kosalka Daitach in Pirush Rashi as Zorak Beichetz Varoga is Tome Betumes Meis. What is the svara by Rashi if you shoot an arrow and you kill them with Tome Betumes Meis? Is because of the svara that the Rebbe was discussing, is Valdosot Ageda from Tumas Maska. Because this should also be like touching. The shooting should also be like touching him. Because of the connection between the person who shot it and the person who got killed, Kinal Barucha. Like we said before, that's the basis for the idea that this is considered to be a chibur, as the Rebbe explained. And the Far explains the Loshonis in Rashi. The diuk do is zorak boy chetz v'harogoi. You threw on him and you killed him, so that's the connection between you and the mace. Was is madgish the shaykhis zwischen dem heurigen nefesh mit dem mace? That emphasizes the connection between the one who killed with the one who died. Number two, the dogma is dafke from zorg by chetz. We give it dafke a chetz because the connection has to be made to the dover makabel tuma, not even, not a stone. Vos is a dover hamakabel tuma. Chetz gets tome. What's the basis for this idea that it should become tome? Is as menver tome betumas maga, that this is the tumas maga. It's like touching him through the arrow, touching the mace. Is as menver tome betumas maga is move on does shaykh dafke. So when could you become Tomei Maga? So then you're killing with something of Makabel Tuma because as the Maga is Bemtsos Adovra Makabel Tuma, it's something which is Makabel Tuma. That's how you're touching it. But if you're not touching a Makabel Tuma, then you wouldn't become Tomei for sure. Now that's why we have to have only the example of Chetz. And number three, as is takedo anord farder kosal kadaitach. There is room for that thought. Yochel afilu, unkadei does to shelo zayin dat man onkum mit hekesh. In order to negate this, we need to have a hekesh to say no, that it has to be mamish negir. This is Rashi. Mashenkin, the Rambam was halt nit as tuma b'chiburoi is min ha'todim. Und der Din von Kol Heilig Nefesh bringt in der Halacha von Acherev Kmeis, that Ahu Adin L'Shar Kelim, Ben Klei Matches, as Areheim L'Negeya Behem Kenegeya B'Meis Atzma, Ma HaMeis Metame Chulu, Av Kelim Shenitmu B'Meis Heim, Av Shenitmu B'Meis, Heim VaKelim O Odom Sheyigo Behem, Tmeim Sumashiva. Basically, the halal cherev that we talked about before, that a cherev is kimes. In other words, we don't connect, we don't say that when you're touching with the with a keli, the mace, so you're actually touching the mace like we're learning in Rashi. The Rambam doesn't hold that is minatoida. The Rambam, why would you be tomei? Because the keli became an aviyah v'satumo, the cholo cherev cholo. The keli becomes, and you're touching the keli that is an avatuma, not because it's considered connecting to the mace. Und dem Din von kol heirig nefesh, what is the heirig nefesh? That's not because you're connecting to the mace. That is because the piece that touched the mace became like the mace. Bringt in der Aloche von Acherev Kmeis. As hu adin l'shar kelim, ben klei matches, chulo. That the same thing is other claim, but that would get the status like the mace. As therefore, if you touch anything that touched the mace, you are like touching the mace, which means not you're connecting to the mace, no, but the item got the tumor, and now you're touching an aviyah v'satuma. You're talking something like the mace. Ma ha-mace metame, av kelim shenitmu b'mace. The kelim that were tum b'mace, so kelim ha'od m'shigu b'hem. So do you have a kelim that touched the kelim that touched the mace? Or a person even to make to Mashiva will become to Mashiva. But it's not Chibur. Bringt nicht viel Akasal Kedaitach. Therefore, it doesn't even bring a possibility as Yechoilis. That means possible. Yochel Azorek Bechetz Varogek. That this is Lashon Rashi is Tomem mitzad dem Chibur zwischen dem Heilig mit Nereg, because that could be because of the connection the Heilig with Nereg. Maybe that's also considered a connection, but the Rambam doesn't buy into connection bechlal. It's only because the Nereg, the Keli becomes like Aviyatuma. No, Erzok, but what does the Rambam say? V'chisale al daitcha chulud. Would enter your mind. The Rambam is shoylel hasvore me'akora. The Rambam rejects the svara from the first place. At the etzem hariga is goyim tumo. So he's trying to say that we can't say by killing somebody you get tummy, not the connection. Uh, we can't say that killing brings tumah. He's getting tumah. The Far Zokter. That's why the Rambam says, Aleph, v'chisala al daitcho, baldos is al derech ha'alocha, because al derech ha'alocha, asvora she'en lamokum lechatchila, is a place that for killing, you should be able to, it's not about connection, it's about becoming tummy just because you killed someone. So he says, chesal al daitcho. Number two, he says, Yora chetz v'horag, nit goy varogoy. He doesn't say him. He's not talking about the connection here. Valdo is nit negay the shaykhs to pull in the nerag. This is not important to know the connection. It's not about connecting. No, that's a ma'isa hariga, because we're saying, could you say that you just for killing you become tummy? We're not talking. This is not about a chibur. Gimel, at his most of the dogma from Zorah Kevin. He adds the example of throwing a stone. But it's not king dover hamakabel tuma. Stone cannot accept tuma. Lahadgish to emphasize as er kum chelo sein the svore, that what is coming to negate the svore as the tuma kum mitzadet a maisariga. That you can't say that for the maisariga you become tummy, because it's not even, it doesn't matter, because you have a stone which is not even a connection that wouldn't even work as a connection because it doesn't become tummy. Was in them is if just for killing you become tummy, it would make a difference. Whether you use the makabel tum or not. That's why the Rambam specifically adds the skila. So all these three on the premise of Rashi and the Sifri, that it has to do, the issue is because it creates a connection. There's some sort of a connection by even if you don't come in direct. When you throw it, there's also a connection over there. Now we need to negate that. But according to the Rambam, connection doesn't mean anything. It's only about if it becomes a tummy. So therefore, the only reason you would become tummy is because to say, if you kill somebody, you become tummy, which is also not a logical at all. And that explains all the languages in the Rambam. Test. The wine of Torah and Rashi. Azevi dosis in tzad ha'ipach the Torah, just as it's in the side of the opposite of good, benegay l'tuma, as it relates to tuma. As a keli metama odom bechibur amez kil negay b'meisatzmei, that the keli would be metama the person by just connecting to the mace as if you touch the mace himself. Al derech zeh dosin tzad ha'toiv. Similarly, it's also in the side of good. Benegay l'tara the kedusha, as it pertains to pure and holiness. As durch dveikus b'tamid chachomim. When you connect to Talmidei Chacham, Mala Olav Akosov Kilo Nidbag B'Shechina Mamish, the Torah counts that you connected to the Shechina through the intermediary of the Talmid Chacham. The Adrab, the contrary, Baal das Mida Tova Meruv Mida Peronis. The good side, measure of good, is greater than the measure of the punishment. Is move on. As Afal Pias Benegay Tuma, even though as far as Tuma is Agroma, a weiter kesher, a cause is a far away connection. V'shayches to minyan achet v'tuma, to the connection of sin and tuma. Poilt nit of dem odom, that does not impact the person as also nitbek werden, that it should connect to him tuma. Nor when es is an anoifung chiburim davke, only when it's connected. Is aber in tzad kedusha anders. In tzad kedusha is different. Kedei zu werden nitbek b'shchina mamesh, in order to connect to shchina mamesh, is genug when is dovuk Talmidei Chacham mit hashayches eizu shetiya. So of any connection, a groma connection, not a garmi. The Gemara sagt kol hamaisi bitl Talmid Chacham. If you marry your daughter to Talmid Chacham, ba'isa pramakit Talmid Chacham, you help the business of Talmid Chacham. Ba'mahane Talmid Chacham nechaso. One who benefits the Talmid Chacham from his asset tutos oif as keilu medabek b'shchina mamish, as if he connects the mamish to the shchina. Und es wird v'atem ad veikum Hashem alkeichem chayim kulchem hayoyim. Sichos Shabbos Parshas Matos Masi Tov Shimon Beis. There was a lot over here, a lot loaded on, and I hope Be'ezus Hashem we understood at least for the first time, and needs to be go over again. This is Sichos Shabbos Parshas Matos Masi Tov Shimon Beis.